Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Finland once again for the first time in what feels like a good long while. Now, I have to admit, I didn't think I would be filming another Finnish beer review for you on the channel for quite some time. But when I got back to Scotland and I opened up my mum and dad's fridge, I got a really nice surprise. This is a beer that I had completely forgotten about, that I bought when I was in Finland a wee while back. So yeah, definitely cool to come across this one again. But this is from a brewery that hasn't featured on the channel before. It's a style that they do supposedly do very, very well, and it has a little bit of a Finnish twist to it too. So I'm really curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Riku, my Finnish beer mule, Riku Sanaksanaho. Shockingly, this is not a Riku beer, which is unusual for our Finnish reviews here. He's told me that these guys are doing some really very, very quirky stuff. So definitely cool that we can feature these guys on the channel. But needless to say, I'm really curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Tampere in the southwest of Finland. We're going to go to the Pirkkala district, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, probably not, and that means that we're going to have a look at my first beer from Panimo Himo. So this particular beer is called Esko. It comes in at 5.5% ABV. They're describing this one as a fruited or candy sour, and it's brewed with mango, cranberry, and Finnish salmiakki licorice. So yeah, this should be quite an unusual one and quite an interesting one to try. So yeah, let's crack on with this and see what this beer has in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Panimo Himo. This is the very first time they're featuring on the channel, as I mentioned earlier, but hopefully not the last. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So yeah, just go in there, use the little search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever you like in there. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Finnish playlist along with a number of other things, and I hope that we can add more beers to that list at some point in the fairly near future. I'll be talking to Riku about that over the next little while. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit about Panimo Himo. And I will thank Riku once again for getting the information on this brewery for me, because these guys are very small and it would be quite difficult to find anything on them, just with me not having any idea about Finnish. So yeah, Panimo Himo is located in the district of Pirkkala in Tampere in the southwest of Finland, and the really special thing about Himo is the location, because they can be found in the beer section of a hypermarket called K-City Market Pirkkala. But this means that technically this is one of the first hypermarkets where you can actually buy beer that is 12% ABV, because in Finland, if it's over 5.5% ABV, it either has to be sold directly from the brewery, or it has to go through the Alko stores, which are the Finnish national monopoly stores, if we can call them that. But the CEO of Panimo Himo is Petri Putila, and he's also the owner of K-City Market Pirkkala. But Petri has been in charge of the market since 2021, and this is also the year in which he founded Panimo Himo, and before that he was running a city market in Lahti. But the head brewer of Himo is Kalle Hirvikoski, and before this he was the brewer at Moose on the Loose, which was closed down after he left. But he was very surprised when he was given or offered the job as head brewer, but the decision for him was quite easy. Moose on the Loose was doing really quite well, but he felt that he was having to do a lot of kind of boring compromises, as he called it, when it came to the brewing side of things, and they were at that point where they needed quite a hefty financial investment to expand their capacity to make the business grow, but that wasn't really on the cards for them. So the offer from Himo meant that he could start all over again and have very good resources, and this made the decision to move a very easy one for him. But the head of sales and marketing at Himo is Timo Latinen. He is apparently like the kind of face of Himo, and he's well known around the Finnish beer scene because he wrote a beer blog called Buntu, probably butchering that pronunciation as Riku thought I might, but he's also imported Russian and Brazilian beers into Finland using a company called Imbibe International, and he can be seen at Himo's counters at beer festivals all around the country. So yeah, he's the one you're going to see if you see Himo at these beer festivals. But the person behind the graphic designs, which seem to be very unique, is Pia Liramo, and she has a background in 3D modelling. So yeah, she does some really good stuff, I have to say. But Himo apparently has brewed 65 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. They've done pretty much every style you can think of, and Riku tells me that the most unique styles are the barrel-aged versions of their sati. And sati, of course, for those of you who don't know, it's this kind of, I don't know if you can technically call it a beer, but it's this Finnish beer-like drink that's very smoky. It has a kind of junipery and woody sort of flavour to it, but Himo have done versions of this that they've aged in Maker's Mark and Isla whiskey barrels. But the base sati itself is very traditional, but you know, as I say, the aging sati in barrels is quite rare, so I'll need to see if I can get a hold of some of that to have a look at. But the problem with reviewing sati on the channel and getting that brought over from Finland would be that sati is very, it's very kind of fragile or volatile, or however you want to describe it. It doesn't hold up very well, from what I gather, if it's held onto for too long. But the beers can be bought from the bottle shop, at the market or beside the brewery, however you want to describe it, and you can also get some growlers there for the beers that are under 5.5% as well. You can find some of these growlers in other city markets around Finland too. But yeah, that is everything that I can really tell you about Panimo Himo for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a little look at the beer itself. So I'll let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. I'm not sure if this is one of the guys from the brewery that's on the art there, but you can see he's got this lovely kind of hat of yeah, mango and cranberries on top, which sort of makes sense. And he's got his oh, that'd be the diamonds. He's got his black diamonds under his eyes, looking very gangster there. But yeah, plain silver top on the can there. It is a 440ml one. I actually can't remember what I paid for this can, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's certainly very nicely presented, but you can tell it's sealed very raw. I guess these guys are a very, very small brewery, in fact. But yeah, as we said earlier, this one comes in at 5.5% ABV. According to the little blurb thing that I found on the Untappd page for this beer, they say that this is a kind of like candied sour, but it's also listed as a fruited sour on the can, so I'm not 100% sure what to make of this. But as I say, 5.5% ABV. This one could be sold in the supermarket in Finland, from what I understand, but it's a sour beer brewed with mango, cranberries and Finnish salmiakki licorice. So should be quite interesting. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. So, oh, it's getting a little bit excited, but it's calmed down quite nicely there. Let me just get this out into the glass and we'll see how it goes. I'm just going to sugar up the bottom of this a little bit and see if we get, just make sure we get a little bit of the sediment or something like this out of it. Yeah, I think we'll leave a little bit in the bottom of the can there, and we can look at the appearance of the beer before we open this one up. So, before we taste it, I should say. Brain is not working today, guys. Very tired. But yeah, anyway, I have to say, this looks pretty interesting actually. There's a few bits of sediment particles just floating around in this one. My mum and dad keep their fridge really cold actually, so it does make my beer sediment a little bit more. But this beer is a couple of months old, I will say that too. But yeah, you can see that when we poured this beer, it's come out with very little head on it. There's just a few little wispy bits on the top of the surface there, but the colour of the head in this beer would be a nice kind of cream sort of colour there. But yeah, absolutely no head left on this one. But yeah, a little bit kind of creamy coloured bubbles there. But you can see there are little bits of carbonation kind of sticking toward the side of the glass. They're quite, fairly reasonable size carbonation bubbles, but you can see little bits of sediment kind of floating around in this one. Colour-wise, this beer is a lovely kind of light amber, I would say. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour too. And when you're talking about kind of modern sour beers like this, the fruity adjuncts are going to play a big role. Much of the colour in this beer will be coming from the malts that have been used, but the mango will be playing a big role in the colour of this. And I have to admit, I'm surprised that this beer doesn't have a little bit of a kind of reddish tint to it because of the presence of the cranberries. I would have expected it to be a little bit more. I would have expected this beer to come out pink, to be quite honest with you. So when I saw the sort of more ambery colour coming out of the can, I was quite surprised at that. But yeah, it does look nice. As I say, big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass there. A few little ones just kind of coming up toward the surface. But the beer itself does look very nice. As I say, just a little bit surprised that this one didn't have a little bit of a pink tint to it because of the cranberries. But yeah, to be honest, I don't know if we really need to say anything else about the appearance of this one, other than that it has a little bit of a natural kind of haze to it, which you can see. So let's have a wee look at the aroma of this one and just see what it's all about. I'm really curious about this beer. Yeah, aroma-wise, this is pretty damn nice, I have to say. Now, when it comes to this style of sub-style of candy sours, I've only ever had one of these, and that was one from Salama. It was the one that had the kind of Ghostbusters ghoul type thing on it. I forget what that beer was called, to be honest with you. But Riku got that one for me because he thought it was really unusual, and I have to say, I wasn't a great fan of that one, to be quite honest. With this beer, as soon as I smell it, I can smell that it has that kind of candy sour type vibe to it. So I'm really curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. But I have had some really nice fruit and licorice sours before, so that's the thing that's also in my mind actually. The lemon licorice sour from Coolhead is one of my favourite sours that I've had in that particular category. So try that one if you get the chance. But yeah, the Finns do know what they're doing with licorice. Licorice is a big thing in the Nordic countries, if you weren't aware of that. But yeah, the aroma of this one is quite nice. It is like a fruity licorice sour, but you do get a wee bit more of that kind of candy type vibe out of it. But lots of lovely fruity notes out of this, I have to say, which is expected, to be honest with you. I feel I'm stating the obvious there. But yeah, it really is an interesting aroma, this beer. But let's do as we always do. We'll try and break it down and just describe it for you that little bit more in depth. So for me, the backbone of this beer, you do get a little bit, and this one actually I've just noticed on the back it says it contains oats as well, so it's probably going to be quite a smooth and kind of slightly yogurty sour in that sense. And I got the impression of that from the aroma too. But yeah, the backbone of this beer, you do get a little touch of like a white bread and bread crusty kind of character out of this one, and that for me I think is really nice. There's a wee touch of like a crackery note, very slight woodiness to it, but yeah, for me, bread crust, white bread, a little bit of cracker, a little bit of wood, as I say, and then you also have a little bit of let's see, above that you start to get the kind of, you get this kind of yogurty note from the oats. As I say, a lot of these beers, quite often they remind me of the little Munch Bunch yogurt, so that's not going to be relevant to Finns watching this video, but the aroma that you get out of this beer that has this kind of yogurty type character to it, it's from the oats mainly, but it gives me this, it reminds me of like, Petit Filou, fromage free, these type of yogurts, and this particular one reminds me of the Munch Bunch yogurts that my mum used to put in my lunchbox when I was small and I was at school. So yeah, there was an apricot one, and this one really reminds me of that. You've got this big sort of yogurty, creamy type character in the malt base with this beer. There's a little bit of like a Werther's Original type sweetness coming out of it too, but you can smell the nice kind of oily licorice. I'm not sure if, I forget the name of this licorice now, salmiakki. I'm not sure if it's a kind of salted licorice. Well, it does say on the side, yeah, salted licorice. But yeah, you can smell that nice oily but still slightly sweet licorice coming out of this one. And this is the thing for me, before I actually went to live in Sweden, I didn't like licorice. It's not something I would think to eat. But if I see it, if my Swedish friends offer it to me, I do quite enjoy a little bit of licorice now and then. Now it's so, things can grow on you, but yeah, that's how it goes. But yeah, the malty character in this beer is really interesting. As I say, bit of bread crust, a little bit of white bread, wee touch of kind of crackery and woody note coming out of the beer. But yeah, quite a little bit of a yogurty sort of sweetness to the beer, then oily licorice, and then a bit of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotch. So yeah, the way this one goes together, I think, is really quite nice in that sense. In terms of the hoppy side of the beer then, so as I've mentioned in reviews before, when it comes to modern sour beers like this, there is a bit of a debate about whether you need to use hops or not, and it just kind of depends on your mentality, to be honest with you. So adding hops into sour beers can add a little bit of depth to it, but if you use fruit as adjuncts, it can suppress the green component, and using hops in the first place can detract a little bit from the sourness of the beer. It just depends what you want to do. Back in the day with the likes of the Hoises and the Flanders Reds and things, they would use older hops that had lost a little bit of their alpha acid potency, so you get the depth of flavour but not the bitterness. A number of modern sour beer breweries do something similar. Here in Scotland, Holy Goat and Vault City do that, but in Sweden, for example, a number of the sour beer brewers like Elm 11, Duck Pond, Fermenterna, they don't use hops in their sour beers because they say you don't really need to. So, as I say, it just depends. But with this one, for me, the aroma, it's interesting because on the can it says they do use hops, but to be honest, it's quite hard to tell. You do get, at the front of the nose, you do get a little bit of a kind of fresh grassiness out of the beer. But other than that, it would be really difficult to detect the use of hops in this one because of the licorice. The more that you smell of this beer, the more of that kind of licoricey, aniseed type character you get out of it. And for me, I think that works. It's really quite interesting. The other thing I'd point out about this beer that I get more of, like above the malty character, you do get a little bit of an almost like lemon sherbety type thing out of this beer. But yeah, for me, in terms of like a green component, it does have a little bit of grassiness to it. There's a wee touch of like an almost woody character, I would say. So it's a little bit earthy, a little bit herbal, but I get quite a bit of a kind of woody note from the hops, I would say too, which is kind of unusual. And then, yeah, then it's all about the fruit. So the fruit is pretty much as you would expect in this one. The cranberry is quite hard to detect in the aroma, I would say. It's kind of like in the very top of the nose. The mango, I would say, dominates the aroma of the beer, and you have got a few other things in there, like a little bit of like a little bit of like apricot and dry apricot, a little bit of papaya, maybe even a teeny little touch of pineapple or something like that. You've got these kind of candied, placebo-y type aromas coming out of this beer. But yeah, aroma-wise, I have to say, it is very interesting. As I always say, take a little bit of time and just enjoy the aroma of the beers before you get stuck into them. But I think we should have a taste of this and just see what it's all about. This could be a really interesting one. So yeah, this one is the Esko, a 5.5% fruited, candied, whatever you want to call it, sour beer with mango, cranberries and salmiakki licorice from Panimo Himo in Pirkkala in Tampere in the southwest of Finland. Let's get stuck into this one. Slanja, skål, cheers, kipis and kitos. Let's do this. Ooh. I'm going to say that's really nice, actually. Yeah. This is a really kind of, it's a very easy-going, sort of summery type sour beer, this one. I like this, I do like this. I can see why some would term it as like a candy sour. I can definitely see why some people would consider it to be that. But yeah, it's got it's really nice. It's, for some reason, I think, you know, when it comes to fruited sours, adding licorice into them can add a real depth to it, and I think it, as I say, I think it works really, really well with this one. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. But yeah, I do think this is, I think this is really quite nice, actually. Certainly, I'll say straight away, I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink it again. You need to have a few sips of this beer, though, to just get your head around what's going on. But it is, these candy sours are interesting because they have a little bit of the kind of smoothie sour character in the base, but they have a little bit of an almost sherbety thing sitting on top. And this one's interesting too because you get the lovely smooth fruits and also just a little bit of hoppy character. But a very nice beer, really nice, just easygoing sort of summery type sour beer, this one. So I think we should just try and break the beer down and describe the flavour a little bit more, as we always do. As I've said many a time when it comes to these modern sour beers, quite often these beers are they're really quite simple in terms of their flavour profiles, but if they're done well, they work and they do it really well. And this beer is just, it is like that. It's straight shooting, but it does the job well. Let's focus on that middle third of your palate then to start off with. So the backbone of the beer, you have a lovely kind of little bit of a fresh white bready bread crust coming out of the beer. For me, the fresh white bready bread crust that you get just forms the backbone of the beer. And as you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little touch of a kind of slight woodiness toward the front of that, and then above that you can feel there's this really dense kind of white bready character there, very, very smooth, and then you start to get a kind of thicker, oaty, creamy type layer coming out of this beer too. So yeah, lovely kind of creamy oaty character coming out of this one, which I think is great. And then above that, you start to get this, the yogurty flavour. This is the interesting thing for me. It is more of a kind of smooth and dense oaty character that comes out of this beer. But then above that, you do get a little bit of that kind of yogurty type character coming out of the beer. So yeah, you got a lovely kind of almost like creamy yogurty character just sitting above the oats, and it, like I say, it does remind me of that kind of munch bunch yogurt that my mum used to put in my lunchbox when I was wee. A little bit of nostalgia coming out there, but above the kind of apricot-y, it's really like a bit of an apricot-y dry mango sort of character, but then above that you get the kind of oily licoricey layer, which is really interesting. The licorice is not too prominent in this beer, it's not too pungent, I should say, in this beer. It kind of comes out a little bit more the further into the aftertaste that you go. But on top of that layer, in the dead centre of your palate, you can feel this little circle there, and within that you get a wee touch of like a Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing coming out of this beer. So yeah, the way that the beer goes together in that particular regard is really nice. I think that's everything we need to say about the middle third of your palate in this one, to be honest with you. So let's have a little look at the back third of the palate and see what we get. But as I often say, the back third of your palate tends to give you similar flavours to the middle third of your palate. They just come out in different intensities. But do remember that general trend with your palate, that sweeter flavours will come out further forward, more dry and bitter flavours will come out further back. But yeah, border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a kind of bready build up in this one. Kind of a more dense white bread underneath and a like fluffier white bread above that. But then the base of that, front third of your palate, at the base of that back third of your palate, the bread crusty character is a little bit drier. You do get the tiniest little bit of a kind of crackery note above that, and pardon me, you can feel the bready layers a lot taller and a lot lighter and more airy, and you can feel some of the kind of oaty dryness at the drier side of the oats just kind of creeping over the top of that back third of your palate. And above everything else, you do have a very slight yeasty kind of character coming out of this one. And the yeasty note for me is really interesting because it is like a slightly more dense white bread. It's got a little bit of a, yeah, it's like a little bit of a more dense white bread. But then, as I say, you also have a little bit of a, you've got a little touch of a kind of honeycomb type quality mixed in with that. So yeah, I always get a little bit of honeycomb in the back, on the back third of the palate from the yeast for some reason. It just, I don't know why, but yeah, you can feel this like dense white bready character with the dry oats and a little bit of honeycomb wrapped around it. But you can definitely feel that the back third of your palate, the flavour is definitely taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, it goes together nicely. On the hoppy side of things then with this beer, what I'll say is that the green component's actually a little bit hard to detect, to be honest with you. There's not too much going on in this one. I would not be surprised if it's like a little bit of a noble hop that's been used in here, because it's very, very smooth, like, you know, Slovenian Styrian Golding or something like that. It's very, very smooth. But yeah, we also have to remember this beer is a few months old at the time of filming, so it's probably close to a year old actually. So a lot of the hoppy character will have dropped out of it, but then again, this beer, a fruited sour, a candied sour, is not going to be the most hop forward style of beer anyway. But yeah, anyway, in the back corners of the palate you do have a little touch of earthiness there. As you move further forward, a little bit of herbal character. And I will point out and emphasise that these flavours are very, very light, but as you move further forward you've got a nice little bit of floral aromaticity there as you reach the front corners of the palate, quite a wet floral aromaticity, and then round the front curve of the tongue, a good little bit of grassiness there. But as I've mentioned on the channel many a time before, when you use fruit in a beer as an adjunct, it's always going to suppress a little bit of the green component. So that's the other thing that's going on with this one. So we'll look at this now. The border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you do get a nice little bit of bready build up in there, kind of dense white bread and a lighter, fluffier white bread above that. But the base of that front third of your palate really is, yeah, a little touch of bread crust, denser white bread, and then a smooth white bready character just sitting on top of that. It is pretty damn nice actually. But yeah, on the fruity side of things then, as I say, there's maybe a very light, like, apricotty, peary type character. You always get that little oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters from the hops will just roll their way out of the beer. The oily kind of side of this beer, when it comes to the fruitiness, feels like it's a little bit of apricot, a little touch of like dry mango, or something like that. So yeah, if they're going to use an American hop in this, something like Simcoe or Victoria's Secret or Idaho 7 would be an ideal choice. One of these more tropical leaning hops. So there could be a little bit of that in there, but green component, as I say, struck me as being a little bit more kind of noble. But above that, you're getting all the kind of fruity characteristics. The more that you drink of this beer, the more you're going to get the cranberry coming out of it. The cranberry, I think, really takes a back seat to the mango in this one, though. Yeah, the cranberry for me is interesting because when you take the beer in, it's not, I will point out as well, this is not an overly sharp and tart sour beer, because you really should talk about impact flavours when it comes to, yeah, you should talk about impact flavours when it comes to these sort of beers, but this beer doesn't really have that kind of punchy tartness to it, which is interesting. You get this lovely, just very slight tartness from the mango in the beginning. So it's with the fruity character on the front of your palate. The mango really is kind of forming the base of it, and the further you go into the aftertaste with it, you can just feel on the front half of that front third of your palate, you're getting a little touch of the juicy cranberry. I would have thought the cranberry might have given you a little bit more tartness out of this beer, but evidently not. But you can feel the drier aspects of the mango just kind of spreading around the edges of the palate there, and yeah, it goes together really quite nicely in that sense. And then the juicy mango just sits on cranberry, sorry, just sits on top of that. You get a wee bit more of the cranberry just kind of around the edges of your tongue too, the further into the aftertaste that you go. But yeah, I really like how this beer goes together in that regard. I think it's really quite nice. Yeah, beer gets a big thumbs up from me, this one. The further you go into the aftertaste with this beer, you do get a wee bit of the kind of candy sour vibe to this one, and the salty side of the licorice shows its head a wee bit more. But this is really nice. I haven't had too many candy sours. As I say, this is their terming it a fruited sour. Untappd are calling it a candied sour, and it really is somewhere in the middle. It's got a little bit of smoothie sour type character to it as well. But yeah, we can talk about style categories all day. The main question should be, is it a good beer? The answer in this case is yes. So I'd be curious to try a few different styles from these guys at some stage. So we'll need to see about making that happen. But as I say, they're very small scale from what I understand. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel then, to round off this review, what will we say about this one? So for me, the mouthfeel in this beer, the mouthfeel of this beer, English is getting bad these days, the mouthfeel of this beer, I'd say it's right in the middle of the spectrum, to be honest with you. Mid-bodied beer, smooth carbonation. It's a mix of oily and creamy. Has a bit of slickness to it as well, which is really interesting. So yeah, kind of oily, smooth, slick type thing. Yeah, it's really quite nice in that sense. In terms of the IBU count, I think that technically speaking this beer will be 0 IBUs, but it will have, you know, perceived bitterness. There is, yeah, you're probably going to get like 2 or 3 IBUs or something like that out of it. The malt base, as we said, has a bit of dryness underneath, a kind of dense smoothness in the middle. You get a bit of the saltiness from the licorice too. That becomes a bit more prominent into the aftertaste, as I said, but then you get a wee touch of sweetness in there as well, and then you also get a little bit you get a very slight tartness to it when you take the beer in from the fruits, but really it's quite a dry and juicy fruity character you get out of this beer. But overall, really interesting one, and something that has tasted my palate a little bit, and that's what you want after 3,800 odd reviews actually, so quite happy with that. Yeah, I think that's everything we really need to say about this beer, to be honest with you. So this was the Esko, a 5.5% fruited candy, whatever you want to call it, sour beer from Panimo Himo, pardon me, in Tampere in the southwest of Finland. This will be, as I say, the last finished review you'll see for a wee while, but I will see about making something happen with Riku. Maybe we can get some finished beers sent out to Hong Kong, I don't know, we'll look into it. But yeah, this was a really nice surprise, and I'm glad that I could do a finished review for you guys after quite some time, because I know the Finnish folk that watch the channel do enjoy these. So yeah, keep me up to date with what's going on in the Finnish beer scene. There are a few new breweries to check out from what Riku tells me, so you will see those on the channel at some point fairly soon. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Panimo Himo's social media, and we will be doing more reviews in the future. But yeah, Slàinte, Skål, cheers, keepis and kiitos. Massive shout out as always to Riku Sanatsnaho, my Finnish beer meal, and do make sure you try some Finnish beers if you get the chance. Slàinte, Skål, cheers, keepis and kiitos once again.